From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Derrick Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Derrick Cressey, and this is episode 115. John O'Neill from Cressey Sports Performance, Massachusetts is going to be guest hosting once again. He's got one of the really bright minds from college strength and conditioning, a guy who followed for the last several years and really picked up a lot from. Runs a great program not only for his college guys, but also for his professional athletes who come back to campus in the off season. So John does a great job of talking about how he develops athletes, but also how he develops the coaches in their internship program and the crucial role that he plays in the athletic department where he is. So I think this is a great one, and I picked up on some good tricks and some ideas that we can apply in both my work in professional sports and the private sector, and I'm sure there'll be something in there that's good for you as well. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it's difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states, on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where Athletic Greens can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. And that's why I use it daily and recommend it to our athletes. 1 scoop of Athletic Greens contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients, including a multivitamin, multimineral, probiotic, green superfood blend, and more. They work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, increase energy and focus, aid in digestion, recovery, and supporting of a healthy immune system. This all can happen without taking multiple products. While most nutritional products come to market and stay stagnant, Athletic Greens continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing 53 improvements over the last decade. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best daily nutritional habit on the planet. It's lifestyle friendly whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar without compromising on taste. They put 75 ingredients through the NSF for Sport certification to come up with a formula that's trusted by some of the world's best athletes, including our own. Right now, Athletic Greens is giving our listeners 10 free travel packets with their subscription. Simply go to athleticgreens.com/Cressey to receive my offer. These travel packs are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health when you're traveling for games, training, or simply when you're on the go. They can be a great counterbalance to less than ideal on-the-road food options. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance to get nutrient diversity, then head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey and get your 10 free travel packets today. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, CRESSEY.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Elite Baseball Development Podcast. My name is John O'Neill, the Director of Performance at the CSP Massachusetts location. This is my 5th episode as a guest host over the last 2 years. You can also hear me on a couple others as one of the people being interviewed. So today I have a very special guest. His name is Dechant. He works at Texas Christian University, where he's been since 2008. He's currently the Assistant Athletic Director of Sports Performance, where he oversees the development of baseball. Alongside those priorities, he handles the development and implementation of the TCU Sports Performance Internship Program that has been in place for over 15 years. Over that time, the internship program has encompassed over 40 semesters and over 250 coaches that have moved on to all levels of professional, collegiate, high school, and private strength and conditioning. During the baseball off seasons, Coach Dakint trains a group of 30-plus current MLB and MILB Frogs, or TCU alums. The Pro Frogs spend 4 months back on campus training for the upcoming season. Prior to TCU, Zach has 2 years experience with the LA Angels, 2 years at Missouri State, and has also spent time at the University of Washington as an intern. He graduated with a bachelor's in health and wellness from Missouri State in 2003, and he is certified through the CS, CCA, NSCA, FMS1, amongst many others. If you're looking to follow Zach on social media, he's on Twitter and Instagram at Zach Dechant, ZachDecHant. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. That was a very impressive introduction.
So not in that bio, so I had to practice that a little bit beforehand. But this is one of the reasons to why you're on the show, because you've done a lot throughout your career, and looking forward to chatting and getting to know you a little bit.
Yeah, I'm big fans of what you guys do, and obviously, coming up in the field of baseball, we all know who Eric is, and what you guys have meant to the sport and strength and conditioning. So I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, end of 2021, Eric and I kind of put together a list for 2022 of people in the field that we're looking to interview. And so a little background, I've been overseeing our internship program here in Massachusetts in my 5th year right now. In my first year, I admittedly, was not following you, had not heard of you. I would say by year 2, I started to get a wave of interns that when I asked, like, all right, who are your influences? Who do you follow? Your name kept coming up. And so I know you've put out a lot of content over the last, I think it's about 3 years or so. I know you've been coaching for about a decade and a half. My first question for you is, what kind of made you make that pivot a little bit into sharing what you do and becoming more of an educator for other coaches versus just your own athletes?
Yeah, it's excuse me. It was difficult getting into social media, and I don't really have an answer for why I never did before. I guess I always viewed it as a waste of time, and my wife actually hates me now because I told her I would never be one of those guys that was on Twitter and Instagram, and at the time probably Snapchat or Facebook, because this was 4 or 5 years ago. And now I have a huge presence on that. And really what it was just, one, I found such use in the platforms for education purposes. I continually got on those platforms just to read and learn because there was so much out there. And then I realized I needed to start educating, putting my viewpoints out there as well, and helping young coaches, because I felt like I had a lot to offer. And that's really what started to, I guess, get those wheels in motion. And then I also knew that I was in the process of, writing our foundation program, which is the book Movement Over Maxes. And eventually that would be a giant platform for me to introduce that to an audience. And so all those things kind of came together. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago when I first created a Twitter account, or first, I guess, started posting on it. And it's kind of snowballed, and in a way, at times, it's taken over my life to, like I said, to my wife's dismay.
So sometimes I think people look at teaching as like a separate entity from learning. So you have learning on one side, teaching on the other. At least in my role, I kind of see them as intertwined, very much so. How much has the experience of becoming an educator to obviously both people in the internship program, but also people you don't know on social media, how much has that forced you to learn more and be better and more efficient with your thoughts?
I mean, that's exactly what it is. I created the internship program at TCU back in 2008 when I first arrived, not only because we needed help, and you need extra hands, extra eyes, extra coaches around, but because it would make me a master at everything that I was trying to teach. I mean, any time you're trying to teach these coaches or athletes or whoever it is, you have to know the subject in and out. And I knew that it was going to force me to really hone in on the principles that I believed in and how to get my message across very efficiently. And so that's one of the reasons why I took that leap to create an internship program.
How much of the structure of it has changed over the years versus when you look back at what you did in 2008, say, all right, the structure was there, but maybe the X's and O's were a little different?
Yeah. So to be honest, what it was I would say the X's and O's were in place from kind of the beginning, right? Because as young strength coaches, we're always looking for the best methods and the best exercises and sets and reps, and all these perfect number scenarios, right? Because you think that's the perfect program. How it has grown over the years is in the the management stuff and how you approach coaching, how you approach your interactions with athletes. That's where it's really changed over the last, especially I'd say, few years. And where we attack it more is I can teach anybody the X's and O's of periodization and how you program speed work and sets and reps and distances. Anybody can learn that stuff, right? But the challenge is for any intern and any young coach is connecting with the athlete and actually being able to get your message across and coaching. And especially at our level, it may be a little different, in the private setting, but at our level, we don't have a ton of time. And a lot of times you've got to touch a lot of athletes in a small window. And so you have to be very, very efficient with your message. You have to be very efficient with the organization and the workflow of how everything is moving. And all these parts are moving, within a 50 or 60, or there's times where we may have 100 athletes in the weight room at one time for one sport. And so it's all those pieces that we're really focused on teaching our interns now. We still teach the X's and O's, but it's those other intangibles that we really want our young coaches to understand and take with them elsewhere.
So since you've been there since 2008, I hear this from, strength coaches have been doing it for a decade plus. Stuff like, kids have changed over the years, or kids aren't as tough as they used to be. In your experience, as someone who runs an organized internship program and an organized strength and conditioning program, and values communication, how much of that is kids have changed versus our expectations for them have changed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know if the kids have changed, because you think about over the course of history, this I'm sure this happens with every generation, where they say, that generation is weak and they're weak-minded and they're soft. If you look back over time, everybody's done this, right? So the kids aren't changing. But I will say, with the advent of social media and all the information that's out there, the kids are pretty dang smart. And so you don't get away a lot of times with some of the I'm struggling for the word here to call the exercises that, the way you've always done it type of a thing. Well, why do you do this? Well, we've always done it that way. That's just how it's always been, right? Baseball is littered with that. But now honestly, kids come in, they're very, very intelligent, whether they're interns or athletes. They know what training should be, what good training should be. And so they don't hesitate sometimes in calling you out or even asking questions as to why they're doing this, where 10 or 15 years ago, athletes, you could do anything with them and they just went along with it. Now they challenge you in some different ways to actually make sure that they're doing the right thing and progressing the right way.
So I think that's a great point. Like, to be an expert right now in anything, or a teacher in anything, you have to be ready for someone that can pull up a phone from their pocket and Google something that you said just to check the validity of it. So you really have to know what you're talking about to be someone who's teaching at this point. So kind of, I guess, shifting gears a little bit, talking about how things have changed over the years, but specifically over the last 2 or 3. So obviously, March 2020, all of our lives changed, very much so, especially I'm sure in the college setting. But how did COVID change the way you guys approach training, both from a day-to-day standpoint and a more long-term planning?
Yeah, so, with COVID for us, we had to be super, we had to whittle away all I shouldn't say the trash, but we had to whittle away everything extra that we didn't need in the program at the time because of the timing of our teams coming into the facility. We could only have one team in the facility at a time. We had to spread that team out across many, many racks with space in between each. So we didn't have a lot of room. We didn't have a lot of time to be in the weight room because we have, 24 plus teams here on campus, and everybody has to get their workout in at some point. And with no 2 teams in the weight room at the same time, we had to be super, super efficient is what I'm getting at. And so one of the ways that we did that is we completely imploded our program that we had truly been running for the previous, 12 or 13 years, which was kind of a high-low system. I'm a huge advocate of high-low and consolidating the central nervous stressors. We had always gone on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday program with some recovery stuff in between. And I essentially had to trash that program for a 4-day program where we went with a low, high, low, high. So Monday low, Tuesday was our high day. We had a Wednesday off. Thursday and Friday we came back with low and high again. And what ended up happening was we had to do much, much less, right? We went 3 high days to 2 high days, but less turned out to be more for us. Our workouts, our training sessions were better as far as intensity goes, intent goes. We had less injuries, less soft tissue problems than we did in the previous years. And it's a change that I made. We were forced to make that change because I never would have done that voluntarily. I've never been a big 4-day workout guy. And really, it's not a 4-day. I should say it's a 2-day because it's 2 high days. And less turned out to be so much more for us in terms of our program. And we're doing the same thing again this year. I don't think that I'll ever go back to the 3 high days where we were going Monday, Wednesday, Friday. What we have to remember is that our athletes here and everywhere else, they're playing baseball year round. So in the fall, when we're in our off season, they've still got a 7 to 8 week fall season that they're playing, where we're practicing as if it's in the middle of April. We're playing inter-squad games on the weekends. Sometimes we're playing other teams. So they've got stress coming from other areas outside of the weight room. And so the less that we did in here, the better our athletes responded to it and the better results we had.
Let's pick up with that idea of the high-low model. It's the same system that we teach at CSP. It's not always as clean in the private sector just because you have kids, with varying schedules and maybe days of the week will change around. But the guys who we can control all the variables for, we are running a high-low model like you talked about. Derrick Hansen has been a huge influence over me, or of mine. I guess for you guys, how much is that high-low model connected or exactly lined up with the baseball side of it? So maybe let's say your pitchers with their bullpen schedule.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's really the ideal scenario that all coaches should strive towards. Because for ultimate athlete health and performance, all these factors, what we call the 4 coactives, it's the technical aspects, the tactical aspect. The technical would be your mechanics and things like that. The tactical aspect is game theory and game strategy, how your offense operates, how the defense operates. Then you've got the physical side, which is what we operate in. You got the psychological side. All those pieces connect to make your athlete perform well and stay healthy. And so many times there's silos everywhere, right? This happens in college strength and conditioning, and I'm sure it happens at the private level as well because you guys don't get to control all the aspects outside of what happens in your facility, where you have the strength coach trashes the athlete because that's, he's doing his workout for the day and we're going to trash these guys. We're going to smoke them. We're going to a lot of heavy strength work or whatever the case is. And then they go to their skill coach or to practice or whatever. And in the siloed model, the coach says, well, I don't care what they did in the weight room or where they did, what they did anywhere else. We're going to trash them over here. We're going to make sure they're mentally tough and all this. And it's just this continual cycle of everybody doing whatever they want on their own versus understanding that each of these stressors has to fit, together. And that the example that Derrick Hansen uses and Charlie Francis, who was, his mentor before that, you got the cup of water. The cup only fits so much water, and that water is stress. And if you fill up your cup with a bunch of stress in practice or in the weight room or with speed work or whatever the case is, something else has to give. We can't continually keep pouring more and more water in that cup. We can't use a fire hose to fill up the cup. Only so much fits. And so ultimately, that's what coaches have to get to is that, and that's what we've tried to do, is to consolidate all of our stressors. So for us, our high intensity days are Tuesdays and Fridays. That's when we do our high intensity speed work, our big lower session as far as strength, speed, or power. Tuesdays and Fridays. Why? Because those are going to be our high days on the field as well. Those are going to be high days not only in the fall during our practice season when we can control these variables, but in the spring what's a high day? It's a game day for us. So those Tuesdays and Fridays become high days as well. So yes, we try to consolidate stress across the entire spectrum of our athletes' training, whether it's skill development, physical development. We try to consolidate all those stressors onto those high and low days. A low day for us in the weight room, we want it to be a low day over at the field, or an off day. So we're always trying to consolidate everything so that our athletes have the most opportunity to recover. And that's really what it's all about.
So when people hear college strength and conditioning, I think most people's within our field, their head goes to thinking like this group model where it's almost like kind of set up like a factory and everyone's doing the same thing. I know just from following your stuff and reading the stuff you've put out that you guys run a much more individualized model than like the classic college model. How do you go about setting up like individualization within a group setting? And then how much does that like high-low model differ for somebody maybe who's playing all the time within games and someone who's not playing much?
Right. So this question can go 1,000 different directions. So if I get confused, if I make it confusing, please let me know. So,
no, totally. The question had like 4 parts to it, and I just wanted to throw information out there and let you talk because I want to hear from you.
Yeah. So the first way that we individualize our training is really by training age. So when our athletes come in, they go into the foundation program, which is what I detailed in Movement Over Maxes. And that really is just about movement, teaching our athletes the movements that they need to understand in the weight room so that we can competently train them. From there, they graduate into our intermediate program, which is built around strength. And then we have an advanced group on top of that is really built around power development. But within our spring, when we're actually in season, we have our tier 1 guys. So our position players are tier 1, tier 2, and our developmental guys. Our tier 1 guys are starters, essentially. They're going to be our older classmen that are starters. And they are really, the in-season is built around readiness for them. They report how they're feeling when they come into the weight room, and then we will adjust the workout based on their readiness, on how their body is. Our tier 2 guys are our young bench contributors. So they may be spot playing a little bit on the weekends. They may be pinch running, spot defense. They may be a DH for us or something like that, but they're not playing every day. So we have time to develop them. Those guys are in our tier 2 system, which is more built around strength development. And then our tier 3 are red shirts and developmental guys that are doing no playing. And they'll kind of go into some of our experimental programs and things like that, where we, may have to chase specific developmental exercises. I may be controlling their throwing program. We may be doing plyo work and things like that to change an arm or to work on mechanics. And then our pitchers are individualized by their throwing program, essentially. Our relievers, now this is where college gets difficult. The college schedule is very, very taxing in season. Our relievers for our pitchers usually go on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. And there's variation within those days. But we in a way have to keep the pitchers on that schedule because it gets very hairy if you get away from it with Thursday travel, Thursday through Sunday, sometimes Monday travel. You're playing a game on Tuesday. So our starting pitchers are individualized by their throwing schedule 100%. Now, the last thing I'll touch on within each one of those programs that we have going at different times throughout the year, we're still individualizing our main movements by the movement solutions that we found that our athletes utilize in their movement screen. We screen everybody just like you do. And we go through, we may change main movements based on what they utilize or how they move. And then by injury history. So we go through a pretty detailed injury history with everybody coming in, and we will modify their training program based around those 2 big things. I'll give you an example. We X-ray guys' hips if we don't find a lot of motion in internal rotation. So we will go in and look and see how bad, of a cam or pincer lesion they may have, what kind of impingement we're looking at, if they've got room to improve, or if we're basically just going to be banging bone on bone by trying to stretch them or forcing them into an exercise that that they shouldn't be doing. So those type of athletes obviously are going to go a different route than an athlete that has, great hip motion and can easily get into a squat position or a deep squat position. Those athletes are going to go down different paths.
So you guys obviously get, waiver recruits every year, and you have this foundations program you put everybody through. When guys get, let's say they're 18 years old, what are the competencies that you wish they had gotten in high school that they don't always get in high school by the time they get to college?
Yeah, well, for us, what we're teaching in the foundation program is, and I will say this, whether it's the fact that I put the book out and our recruits buy the book and have ran through the foundation program before they've gotten here, or whatever the case is, maybe they've gotten strength coaches now at their high schools. Hopefully high schools are buying into the fact that you have to have a full-time certified strength coach for your athletes. But in the last, 4 or 5 years, we have seen a huge increase in the development of our athletes coming in. 10 years ago, I would have athletes that had never done a hip hinge before, had never truthfully done a reverse pull-up, had never done any scap work, and it was kind of shocking. But the big things that we want our athletes to be competent in when they walk in the door are things like just understanding the athletic position. So many kids don't even know how to get into an athletic position, and jump training is a massive portion of what we do with our athletes on the physical preparation side. And we can't teach our athletes how to jump if they've never been in this athletic position. They've never learned how to land. So the athletic position is kind of the number one thing that we're teaching the first day of our foundation program. And then from there, it goes into your basic patterns, your squat pattern, your hinge pattern, your upper body push and pull. We call it a reverse pull-up and a hand pickup push-up. And then our stability series for the trunk. So your ISO core on all 4 sides, and we do our ISO lunge to start our single leg training. It's the basic movement patterns that I wish all of our athletes knew, because from that, then we branch out like you heard in a bunch of different directions, and we can start to develop our athletes. But if your athletes don't know how to move in those basic fundamental patterns, then you can't progress training.
So follow-up question there. Like, I know, not always do you have athletes that the weight room matches up to their on-field skills. Like, we've seen guys that maybe throw 95 miles an hour who don't move well at all in the gym. We see guys who are weight room heroes but aren't great on the field. How do you go about having that conversation with athletes who maybe are having all kinds of success on the field but are still in your tier one, in your bottom tier, or the kids who are in your top tier but maybe aren't having success on the field? Like, how do you and your coaching staff navigate those conversations?
Well, yeah, I mean, it really comes back to skill development, right? The weight room for us is built around robustness, so that we can prevent injury. We can, change athletes' bodies, whether they need to, gain lean muscle mass, lose some fat. The weight room for us is about robustness and really reducing injury risk. And then when we take it a step further with an athlete that may be a weight room superstar, but he struggles on field, that's where we really start to educate him as far as, well, the skill development piece is the piece that we're really after. And we may chase some things in the weight room to try to create some transfer, like we talked about earlier, some of the specific developmental exercises and things like that. But it's a continual, for us, educating the athletes and the coaching staff that it's not about the weight room. I tell, and this is our interns, everybody across the board, we talk about this. What happens in the weight room is completely separate, really, from what happens out on the field. That's where we need to chase adaptation. And we do that in all the speed stuff that we do, the acceleration, the max velocity work that we chase with our position and our pitchers, to be honest. The jumps, the med ball throws, all of that stuff is going to have higher transfer because it's got speeds that are closer to on-field action than hardly any of the weight room stuff. So it's about educating your coaches, your athletes, and my interns specifically, that what you need to be worried about is the on-field stuff more than the weight room any day of the week, in my opinion.
It sounds like you guys probably do a good job of kind of auditing your programs and figuring out what's working and what you have to change. How has that process evolved for you over the years? So I'm sure, you haven't always, had the same exact thought process or the same exact auditing system. Like, let's say in 2008, you write a program, were you guys sticking to that to a T, maybe to a fault back then, whereas now you're writing the program and kind of maybe tinkering things or changing things as you go? Like, what does that process look like for you?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is my advice for the young coaches, the interns that I have. They walk into our program and they see what I described, 2 questions ago, where we have multiple different programs going on of different training levels, different exercises within each one of those training levels. And I think it's overwhelming for those coaches to think, how am I going to do this wherever else I go, or wherever I go? And the reality is in 2008, when I walked into the program, we started everybody in the foundation program. Let's teach them how to move first. And then over the years, as we started noticing a need for, this kid is really, really developed athletically, he does everything great, he does not need to be doing the same thing as this incoming freshman. Let's start to branch these programs out and to create more, advanced development. So that's how we've created the models as far as each one of these steps in the program with our, foundation and our intermediate and our advanced. That's how we've created those models. It's just been out of necessity over the years, really. As far as auditing the program, it comes back to technology now for us that we didn't have access to at the time. For us, collecting data it needs to happen during training. I'm not somebody I don't need to max our guys, every 6 weeks to see if we've made gains. We're not going to do testing days or anything like that. We collect data as we train on a daily basis. And I'll give you an example. Today alone, we just finished a group, 35 minutes ago or 40 minutes ago before I got on this call with you. And today we tested fly sprints on our free lap timing system, and we got vertical jumps on everybody because we superset our main lower body exercise with just a standard vertical jump on the just jump mat. And so we ended up taking the highs from everybody. And so data collection for us is a continual process during training. It's not a testing day or anything like that. And then on top of that, we collect RPEs. We talk and communicate with our athletes on a daily basis as soon as they walk in the weight room to see how they're feeling, and then adjust the program, as it goes. And all this comes with experience. That's my advice for interns is, you're going to go somewhere, you're going to start with the easiest program that you can implement and coach very, very well. Don't get in over your skis, because too many coaches want to do that and then they can't coach it. They can't implement it. It doesn't go well. It falls apart. You need to implement something that's very easy and standardized from the beginning. Get your feet under you, and then as you see the process and it starts to kind of lay out in front of you, you'll be able to take these different routes with your athletes and individualize a little bit more.
What else are you guys looking at other than a vertical jump? And you mentioned the flying sprints. Like, what does the list of or the battery of tests look like for you guys?
Yeah, so it's always going to be throughout the week. We're testing acceleration, max velocity on the free lap every week. We do that throughout the off season. Vertical jump is always a piece of that. We have several different styles of vertical jump that we'll do. We do a 2-step, your standard vertical jump, a 2-step into it, and then we do depth jumps off of 18, 24, and 30-inch boxes at different times. So we can collect all that data there. But one of the big pieces is our Vault force plates. That's something that we didn't have in the past. We use those to determine at the beginning of the year, a lot of times, how strong an athlete is, whether they've got the pre-required strength, whatever you want to call it, whether they've got the strength that they need, or we need to chase that a little bit more. So we take we do an isometric mid-thigh pull, which is actually an isometric belt squat for us. Same concept, but we do that at the beginning of the year with our athletes. And then we test every single week on a counter movement jump and a squat jump. So the squat jump is you're holding it at the switch, at the counter movement switch for a 3-second hold, so that we eliminate that stretch shortening cycle. We're looking at those things, and one of my former pitchers is kind of our sports scientist, so we run data all the time on that, looking at readiness a little bit, but mostly for the valve force plates are for performance, looking at performance changes. And then we always have that data from the first week, like I was talking about with our isometric mid-thigh pull and our jumps that first week that they come in the program, to refer back to if we ever have any injuries. So it's a return to play protocol as well for us.
What's been one or two pieces of information that, had you not been running tests, you would have never guessed?
If you want the truth, the easiest one is max velocity work. I'm honestly very, very upset at myself for the decade. We've had the free lap system for 5 or 6 years now, but the decade prior to that, I look back and think I was probably just spinning my wheels with a lot of the speed stuff that we were doing. Early on in my career, a lot of times you were scared to do max velo work. Everybody that I had ever worked with as a coach, they never did that because, well, we're going to hurt a hamstring. Well, now we realize that these athletes need to be exposed to max velocity really on about a weekly basis to inoculate them against a hamstring injury. That's actually a huge piece of it. But we were never timing and testing anything, so we never had objective data to go back on. And what changed? We had this happen several years ago, and I started testing every one of our guys all the time. One of our coaches said to me during one of our games in the spring, said, "Why is it that every JUCO guy that we get in here gets slower over the course of their 2 or 3 years that they're with us?" And I was like, well, they don't get slower. Like, how are you testing this? They do it at a game when they're recruiting a kid with a stopwatch from, contact down the line to first base. And so we all know that it's not exactly the most accurate method. And it really, really upset me. And so I started sending the data to our coaches every single week. So now we test acceleration and max V on our free lap. And every single week, our players and our coaching staff gets the report back as far as where you ranked for the week, how you have progressed versus your PRs, so that our coaches always know who was fast, who's not fast, they know what's what. And where this would have, killed us in the past was I remember the first year I used this, we had a JUCO kid come in and they had told me, "Oh, you're going to love this kid. This kid is a speed demon." And maybe he is on the field. Maybe he plays fast and he reads the game very, very well, because that can be a form of speed. When we got him in and tested him, he actually tested in the bottom 10 or 20% of our athletes of our position players, and he wasn't that fast. But had I never been able to show them objective data, I would have gotten pinned for that years down the road when they said, well, this kid is not very fast. He's unimpressive as far as that. He's gotten slower since he's gotten here. I'd have never been able to back up my statement of this kid isn't as fast as you think. He may play fast because he reads the game well, but he's not truly a speed demon. And so that objective data and everything that you do, especially for me, the running stuff, has been a huge, huge plus for our coaching staff.
That sounds awesome. I'm sure you guys have a lot of good data. What are the main? You mentioned max velocity. Are you looking at 60s, 80s, 100s? Like what are the main rep schemes you're testing?
No, so with that, our big ones are essentially a 10-yard. The staples for us are a 10-yard acceleration,
yep,
and a 10-yard fly out of usually a 30-yard build-in. So we've got a 30-yard build-up into that 10-yard fly. We have other data as far as we've done splits from, a 0 to a 30 or 40-yard sprint with splits every 10, so that we could start to kind of break down where guys fell apart a little bit, or what area of the sprint, whether it was acceleration, transitional speed, or max V, that they needed help in. But the staples that we always use during the week are going to come back to a 10-yard acceleration and a 10-yard fly from that 30-yard plus build-in.
You mentioned Charlie Francis and Derrick Hansen earlier. Originally, I think the first book is Charlie Francis' Training System, and then he's got a handful of others and a seminar series from there that are worth looking into for coaches. What other sprint resources or other coaches do you tend to draw information from on the speed side?
Yeah, I mean, it's all started with Charlie Francis for sure. I mean, the information he put out many, many years ago, it's still relevant today. He was ahead of his time. But from there, you go to Derrick Hansen. Derrick Hansen's got great stuff. Somebody who's doing it really, really well right now, especially on social media, and he puts out a ton of content, is Les Spellman. Les is training NFL Combine guys. He's got speed groups, going all the time with pro athletes, with track and field athletes. He's doing a lot of good stuff. He's talked about how they speed profile guys, which I kind of touched on a little bit earlier. He's got a course out now. I think it's called The Art of Acceleration that I haven't seen, but I've heard good things about. And, I will touch on this real quick. We've got a local guy here by the name of, his name is Mihal, and I'm going to mess up his last name. Mihal has put out some excellent information on how to do resisted sprint training, which we use a ton of, very easily, how to profile it and how to create, kind of groups within within the team setting with very, very, very easy means. That's one of the challenges with some of the JB Marin stuff that Les Spellman follows, is that you need radars or GPS at times. You need some tech to be able to do some of that speed profiling. But the stuff that Mihal has come out with, and I'll look up his name real quick because I feel terrible that we've even had him over here to speak to our staff, and he did an incredible job.
Yeah, go for it. I'm looking it up on social media right now and can't find it. So
yeah, he pronounces it Mihal, but it's titled. It's Michael, but he's an Irishman and he pronounces it Mihal, and I cannot remember his name. But we'll figure it out before the podcast is up.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it's something we put in the show notes too. Then we can get it out towards the end of it. But
he did an excellent presentation for TFC back. It was over COVID in 2020, and that's actually where I learned about some of his methods. And so we apply his resisted acceleration stuff with our baseball guys over the course of the off season. We utilize chain resistance, and we profile them, and then we set them into groups based on how much resistance they need, so to speak.
So we mentioned this is kind of on the topic of learning from other coaches and piggybacking off of auditing your own programs. What are other kind of methods? You mentioned social media. How much has your own continuing education evolved over the last 15 years in terms of sources you look for, coaches you talk to? Like, what is your own process for learning new information look like?
Yeah, it's it's ever evolving, right? You look back at the programs that I wrote back in 2008, 2010, 12, and I laugh at some of the stuff that we were doing. Where it really transitioned was I went into a phase where I got really interested in the human body, and we started looking at our screening process and got very detailed on, I would say, what's the word I'm looking for here? We got very into individualization and I guess, kind of the old FMS system. This was back in, 2008, maybe 10, 12, somewhere in there. The FMS system and corrective exercises. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And then at one point, we got so far into corrective exercises that I felt like we lost the performance aspect of our program, and we were having more injuries than ever before. And we weren't building robust athletes that were ready for the stresses that they were going to face on field. And so I after that, I kind of transitioned back into being, I guess, the typical strength coach in a way, where we started applying stress again and big compound exercises, and we started getting our guys stronger again because I went away from it. Like I said, we had seen injuries kind of cropping up, and so I thought we were doing too much, and we got so far off track that when I changed and went back to it, we saw our injuries decrease, go back down. And then along those same lines, it's about communicating with your coaching staff at that time for us that, we've got to be all aligned going the same direction as far as applying stress to our athletes. Now it's kind of transitioned to where, my role here as an assistant athletic director, I oversee the entire strength and conditioning department. It's a lot of the education I'm trying to do right now is more on the management side and handling people and teaching our coaches how to coach versus diving deep into the X's and O's of programming and things like that. But I will say, everybody out there, they need a mentor. They need somebody that they can go to with questions. And I have that. He was in professional baseball and super, super intelligent guy. And I have a mentor that I go to and ask questions and get feedback. And so, I guess that's kind of the process that I'm in right now.
One of the things you said in there I'm curious about now. So when I listen to a lot of other podcasts, I feel like a classic podcast question is like, describe a day in the life, or tell me what your day-to-day looks like. I originally wasn't planning on asking that just because I feel like it's so cliche and it's a lot of the kind of similar answers, but I feel like you have so much going on from a administration side to, you mentioned data collection, to talking to the skill side of it, to running an internship program. What does your week look like?
Oh boy. Yeah. This question could be the entire podcast, right? But
yeah, well, usually it's the first question and I skip it because it's not always like it's so monotonous, but I think this answer will actually be really good just because you have your hands in so many different places that I'm curious to see how you balance all of it.
Yeah, that's the that's the struggle right now, is I don't know if I'm balancing it well. So right now, because of class schedules and because of weight room availability, so my day is going to start at about 6:15 or 6:30 here on campus. Our first group for baseball starts at 6:45, and they're going to go to about 8 o'clock, 8:15. That's going to get whittled down a lot because we are starting practice on Friday. So currently we're still doing some of our speed work. We've got to touch that. So that group lasts a little bit longer. Then I've got a break. Today I had a break until 10, which was filled with all the equipment purchases, all the managerial stuff that you've got to oversee. Talking with staff members, right now we've got to do end of the year reviews, which should have happened a couple weeks ago, but we're finishing up reviews for the previous year. I had a staff meeting from 10 to 11 that goes over all the details with baseball and practice coming up and what we're doing for the week. And then I'm back in my office at about 11. I tried to get a workout in till 12. Our next group started from 12 to about 1:15, 1:30, somewhere in there. Kids will roll from there straight over to practice to individuals right now. If I've got throwing programs going on, I've got to go over to that. So I'm at practice running that or GPS, working on the GPS for, we might be over there until 4 or 5, sometimes later at night. And then I actually have another team in the weight room that I oversee. And then in the middle of all that, I'm trying to write programs. We're trying to teach our interns, how to coach, how to program, all these other things. So the day goes by very, very quickly.
I think that's awesome for young coaches to hear because I do think can be a little bit of what I call a graduation mindset, and I'm sure I didn't invent that term, but it's almost like you finish your internship and you've graduated into this nice job where everything's going to be all lined up, but you just listed like 7 or 8 things consecutively that are just a standard day in the life, and all of them were a little bit different. And I know because just from hearing you on other stuff, I heard you one time say, I think it was you lived in 13 different spots within like a 3-year period when you started in this field.
Yes. Yeah. That's the life of a young strength coach. You have to move around in order to get jobs, to advance your career. You have to move around, and you're going to be in a lot of different spots. So these interns that come to me and say, well, I don't want to leave DFW. I love it here in DFW. I'm not going to leave. I'll just try to be a strength coach here. Well, that may work, but truth be told, you either get to live in the city that you want to live in, or you're going to be a strength coach. And those two really don't go together a lot of times.
And I think that both those things go hand in hand. Taking on different responsibilities, being really busy, being really willing to take a gamble on yourself and move somewhere else. The last, I guess, main section that I didn't get to it all throughout this, and we've got maybe 10 minutes or so left, but I want to get to it before we're done. Within your bio, you talk about having over 30 current professional guys come back in the off season. What does your role with them look like, and how do you go about setting up their off season?
Yeah, so realistically, before COVID, we had this massive group. Since COVID, that group is kind of whittled down, and in part because of the school just wouldn't let us have outsiders on campus, if you want the truth, because it was too much of a risk. But when they are on campus, what we used to do is we would screen everybody. Obviously, we take them through our force plate, all of our profiling on the force plate, and then it was kind of building programs to, again, just like I would for our college guys, to their training age in a way. We've got some older guys that need a little bit, I guess, less on the training side, that they've been in the MLB for a long, long time. And really it's about making sure that they're as healthy as possible. And then we've got young guys that are in those low levels of minor league baseball that just need to develop. So it was kind of about applying the appropriate stress to their level and their needs.
And that makes perfect sense. And I think that could be a whole separate podcast. But I want to, make sure we keep it, within relative time confines here. This podcast has listeners that are high school coaches, parents, players from high school to college to professional, guys who coach on the skill side, guys who coach on the S&C side. So this last series of questions, I want to ask you basically one or two pieces of advice or feedback from you, what you would want each population to hear. So let's start with parents. So if the parent of a high school or college athlete is listening, what kind of information would you want them to know?
Well, for the parents, what they need to know is that the in-season training is very, very important for their athletes. So many high school kids that we talk to in the recruiting process, they train hard in the fall, in the off season, and then they get to the in season and they completely dump their training. And it's 3 steps up the mountain and 4 steps back down. And parents will say, well, we just don't have time for it. He plays too much. He does this. If development for baseball is a priority, then you need to be training during that time. It's too big of a window that they lose out on development during these high school years when their androgens are going crazy. They have this huge window of development, the best that they'll ever have, and so many athletes don't do anything with it. That's the number one thing I would say to parents.
I think that answer could probably cover with players as well, but I'll let you kind of expand upon that. Like if you're talking to a group of older high school kids, early college kids, what's information that you find yourself telling those kids all the time?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. That is the number one thing. Outside of that, I would probably touch on nutrition as the biggest weakness that we see when it comes to their development. It's an absolute weapon if you use it correctly. And you ask kids, what did you have for breakfast this morning? I didn't have time for breakfast. But you want to be a great baseball player. You're trying to get bigger, faster, and stronger, but you didn't eat breakfast. Do you think that's the appropriate way to fuel? And so we really have to preach the nutritional aspects to these athletes as well, because that is a huge gap in their development.
The third population we'll go to, let's talk baseball coaches. So at least in my role, in my little bubble of the world up here in Massachusetts, I've purposely tried to speak to groups of baseball coaches, whether it's in person, different events, even just one-on-one conversations. I find it much more rewarding than talking to people in the S&C field. And not the conversations like this are awesome, and I don't mean that. I mean more so like I think I have a bigger impact if I actually relay information to a coach. So how do you as a strength coach go about talking to your own skill coaches that you're around, as the baseball coaches in person, but also like high school coaches? What kind of information would you want them to be aware of?
Yeah, it's about continual education, trying to educate your coaching staff on, what you're trying to achieve in the weight room and how to, like we've talked about this entire podcast, how to consolidate those stressors for optimal performance and health for our athletes. It's really built around recovery. And so when we consolidate those stresses, we give our athletes the most optimal chance to recover. And so it goes back to communicating with your coaching staff. And then the high school coaches that I talk to, it's, I honestly preach movement over maxes all the time to them, because they wear the hat of every piece of their program, right? They're the strength coach. They're the hitting coach, the pitching coach. They're doing the administrative work, setting up the schedules and all this other stuff. And a lot of them, they just do what they've always done in the weight room, right? This is how I trained when I was, younger. Well, that's not necessarily the right way. And so there's so much information out there these days. I say, just make sure you're educating yourself. I've put an easy to follow system out there for you to work with youth and high school athletes. And so it's a continual education process that it doesn't need to be, this is how we've always done it, and this is why we're doing it this way. You need to have a reason for why you're developing your athletes like you are. And if you don't know, then, I've put out resources for coaches to help.
And then last population here, young strength and conditioning coaches. So, which has been a theme a lot within this podcast. You oversee an internship program and have for, almost 15 years now. What are one or two pieces of information that you find yourself telling every single intern class, regardless of who they are and where they come from?
Yeah, it's about connecting with the athletes. We can teach anybody the X's and O's of periodization and programming. If you can't connect and convey your message to your athletes where they want to buy in and follow you, then you have no shot.
I think that's perfect, and it's concise, and it probably lines up a lot with other internship programs. I know it does with ours for sure. At least on our end, our X's and O's can vary from time to time, and exact assessment protocols and exact ways that we coach something might vary. But the constant throughout the years in the business is the ability to connect with the athletes and the level of care that we try to provide. And I'm sure you guys are the same way.
That's exactly it. If you can't communicate with your kids, and your kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
All right. So to wrap it up here, kind of a two-part question. So within your professional life, what is one thing that you're looking forward to in the future?
Honestly, it's building our staff here at TCU. Like I said, I've recently taken over as an athletic director over the entire sports performance department, and it's, I guess, getting all these coaches moving in the same direction with the same vision.
And then second part of the question, within your personal life or outside of the weight room, what's something you're looking forward to when you get some downtime?
We just had a son in August. He's 5.5, going on 6 months old now. So everything in my life is for him and my wife. As soon as I leave here, as soon as I get a chance to get out of here, I'm headed home to do whatever I can with him. That's all that matters.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that pretty much sums up. I guess not just we talked a little bit about a day in a life for you, but kind of your overall mindset, both from a family side, like you just mentioned, but also from a educational side and a training side, and just a general outlook on how to go about being a professional. So I definitely learned a lot in the last hour or so. You're a guy who I've looked up to and wanted to connect with for a few years now, and hopefully this is the first of multiple conversations.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys thinking about me and having me on, John.
And to the listeners, thanks again for tuning in. Hope to be back with you guys soon with another guest. But if not, take care and talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.